Abhorred monster, fiend that thou art, the tortures of hell are too mild a vengeance for thy crimes. Wretched devil, you reproach me with your creation? Come on then, that I may extinguish the spark which I so negligently bestowed. My rage was without bounds. I sprang on him, impelled by all the feelings which can arm one being against the existence of another. He easily eluded me and said,
"Be calm. I entreat you to hear me before you give vent to your hatred upon my devoted head. Have I not suffered enough that you seek to increase my misery? Life, although it may only be an accumulation of anguish, is dear to me, and I will defend it. Remember, thou hast made me more powerful than thyself. My height is superior to thine, my joints more supple, but I will not be tempted to set myself in opposition to thee. I am thy creature, and I will be even mild and docile to my natural lord and king, if thou wilt also perform thy part, the which thou owest me. O Frankenstein, be not equitable to every other, and trample upon me alone, to whom thy justice, and even thy clemency and affection is most due. Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, whom thou drivest from joys for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss, from which I alone am irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous."
You're listening to the Significantly Trivial Podcast. I'm your host, Rome. Hello again. Thank you for joining me in the third episode of this podcast. And yeah, we are still in the Halloween spirit, talking about one of, if not the most iconic Halloween monsters of all time. We'll take a look at the story behind its origin, its literary, historical, cultural, and social significance, and how it continues to act as a warning, especially for today's technologically advanced world. If you're joining us for the first time, this podcast takes a seemingly trivial piece of information, something many would consider useless or insignificant, and peels back the layers to reveal a deeper meaning and importance. Why? Because no matter how trivial it may seem, everything you know is important. It doesn't matter what it is, at one point you found it important enough, interesting enough that you decided to remember it. And that's all that should matter. So if you love trivia like me, you've found the right place. And the trivia question in this episode is, her story about a creature brought to life through electricity is widely considered to be the first work of science fiction. The answer is Mary Shelley and her story Frankenstein. Now, the first thing I want to clear up is that while many know of the name Frankenstein, most mistakenly think that that's the name of the creature, the monster. But in fact, it is the name of the creator. So keep that in mind as we go through this episode. But more on that later. There's just so much to unpack here, and I really want to start from the beginning. It was a dark and gloomy night. No, really it was. The year 1816 was unusually cold and dreary. Temperatures in Europe were significantly colder than they had been for quite some time. There were reports of frost and even snowfall in June and July in several parts of the continent. The summer was also extremely wet. Rain fell constantly and for what seemed like days. Areas like the British Isles, France, Germany, and Switzerland experienced twice the normal amount of rainfall in those summer months. And the sun seemed eternally veiled behind a curtain of dust and haze. This led to a pervasive darkness that engulfed most of the day, but would lead to spectacularly vivid sunsets. This created an atmosphere of gloom and only contributed to an already dreary state of affairs for Europe. The Napoleonic Wars were just drawing to an end, and its effects were still being felt. There were widespread food shortages resulting in the worst famine in a century, riots, and a typhus epidemic that had already killed over 50,000 people. But what exactly caused the dark and gloomy environment and the year without a summer, as it came known to be? Well, no one knew at the time, but the year before, in 1815, half a world away, on the island of Sumbawa in Indonesia, a volcano literally blew its top. The eruption of Mount Tambora in April of 1815 is considered the largest and most powerful volcanic eruption in recorded human history. With a VEI index of 7, VEI standing for Volcanic Explosivity Index, it is only one step below the most powerful eruptions ever, and dwarfs those of Mount St. Helens and the 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, which is considered the most powerful eruption in recent memory. Although I think the very recent eruption in Tonga comes really close. It's too early to really tell. Scientists and researchers are still gathering data on it. This eruption in 1815 ejected about 10 cubic miles of earth, dirt, rocks, and ash into the atmosphere. Whatever didn't come down stayed in the upper atmosphere and circled the earth and caused what's called a volcanic winter. All the material in the atmosphere acts as a type of mirror, reflecting sunlight and solar radiation back into space, causing global temperatures to drop significantly, affecting weather patterns and agricultural disturbances, among other things. It was under these dark and dreary conditions that the story of Frankenstein was born. Mary Shelley was born Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin in London in 1797. She was the daughter of two of the most radical free thinkers of the time. Her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, was a pioneering feminist philosopher and was the author of A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, one of the earliest works of feminist philosophy. Mary unfortunately never got to know her, though. Her mother died tragically only 11 days after her birth. Her father was William Godwin, a political philosopher, novelist, and a vocal proponent of free love and anarchy. Sounds like one of the first hippies. Growing up in this intellectual environment, Mary Shelley naturally was drawn towards the literary arts. She would spend countless hours reading the many books in her father's library, and often found inspiration in her mother's writings. She also found solace in reading by her mother's grave. Along with her intellect, there was a spiritual side to her as well. At the young age of 16, she met the romantic poet Percy Bysshe Shelley. She soon fell in love with the 21-year-old writer, who was also married at the time. Her father naturally disapproved of this relationship, which forced the two to elope to France. Their early life together was filled with hardships and loss. Mary gave birth to her first child, a daughter, in 1815. Born prematurely, the baby died just a few weeks after. She would go on to lose 3 more children during childbirth, with only one surviving. This tragic loss and the perceived guilt she endured highly influenced the many themes throughout the novel. Mary and Percy were officially married the following year, 1816, after Percy's estranged wife tragically committed suicide. When they eloped to France, Mary's stepsister, Claire Claremont, joined them. At the time, Claire was in a relationship with none other than Lord Byron, the poet and writer famous for works such as Don Juan and the timeless She Walks in Beauty. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meets in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. That summer, Lord Byron invited the couple to join him in Switzerland, Lake Geneva to be exact, at the Villa Diodati, where Byron liked to frequent. Joining them would be John Polidori, Byron's physician, and a writer himself. The group hoped that the weather would change for the better to enjoy the lovely Swiss summer. But unfortunately, the rainy, cold, and gloomy weather continued, which was a direct result of the eruption of Mount Tambora. So they were basically stuck indoors. To pass the time, they read. They were writers after all, so they kind of enjoyed those things. Now, the books at the villa included a collection of old German ghost stories. Having been inspired by these, Byron proposed a challenge to his guests. Who could write the best ghost story? Initially excited about the proposition, Mary eventually struggled finding an idea for her tale. However, an all-night philosophical discussion between her, Percy, and Byron about the nature of life, death, and the emerging science of galvanism, the use of electricity to stimulate muscle contraction, sparked her imagination. Shortly after that discussion, Mary experienced what was known as a waking dream, a nightmare really. In it she recounted,
I saw, with shut eyes, but acute mental vision. I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then, on the working of some powerful engine, show signs of life, and stir with an uneasy, half-vital motion. Frightful must be the consequence of any human endeavor to mock the stupendous mechanism of the creator of the world.
This was her breakthrough. She began writing, and after a bit of encouragement from Percy, what began as a short story for the challenge eventually grew into a full-length novel. She finished it in 1817 and published it anonymously in 1818. The legend of Frankenstein was born amidst the atmospheric fallout from a distant cataclysmic volcanic eruption, creating the perfect, dreary, and confining setting for Mary Shelley to conceive her dark and enduring tale of unnatural creation and abandonment.
It's alive! Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! Oh, in the name of God!
I want to first discuss the common misnomer of the name Frankenstein. I mentioned this earlier that many, if not most people, when they hear the name Frankenstein, automatically think of this green, lumbering brute of a monster with a square head, a Caesar haircut, and electrodes coming out of his neck. Well, that's not true. Frankenstein is the name of the creator of the monster, who is a scientist, doctor. His first name being Victor, and the creature he creates actually is nameless throughout the entire book. Instead of a proper name, Victor's creation is referred to using descriptive and often dehumanizing terms such as wretch, monster, creature, demon, devil, and fiend. The reason for this misconception is mostly because most people are familiar with Frankenstein through the movie or movies, the Hollywood effect, and most are not familiar with the novel itself and probably haven't even read it. I personally read it a long time ago, and many parts of the story have escaped me since. So let's go over what the story is about, a little refresher of sorts. Victor Frankenstein is a brilliant but ambitious scientist who is driven by the overwhelming desire to penetrate the secrets of life and death. He dedicates himself to the obsessive, unhallowed pursuit of creating an animate being from collected human and animal parts. To accomplish this, Victor relies on the science of galvanism, which is the science of using electricity to stimulate nerves and muscles and possibly reanimating dead tissue. And this is where and how the story gets the distinction of being the first work of science fiction, because it departed from the purely magical or supernatural explanations for creation, instead using plausible, cutting-edge science, specifically a combination of chemistry, anatomy, and the then popular theory of galvanism, as the mechanism for generating life. This established the core premise of science fiction, stories driven by the consequences of scientific and technological innovation. So Victor does succeed in reanimating his creation. Initially, he was ecstatic that his experiment worked. but it was soon replaced by complete and utter revulsion. I mean, the creature was, after all, literally stitched together using parts from dead people and animals. Shelley describes the creature as immense, standing over 8 feet tall, with sickly yellowy skin that gave it a sallow, translucent, corpse-like appearance. Its eyes were dead, and it moved in a frighteningly abnormal, convulsive manner. Victor had hoped to create something beautiful, but his ambition blinded him, creating this monstrosity that stood before him now. Now horrified by what he's done, Victor flees and abandons the creature and is left to navigate an unknown world alone. Before I go any further, I want to address another misconception of the story. Most think Frankenstein's creation is a mindless brute, void of any type of comprehension and ability to learn. That is actually untrue. In the novel, the creature is capable of observing others and teaches himself to read, speak, and understand human society and the world around him. He even reads Milton's Paradise Lost, which is a highly significant point in the novel, in that it is symbolic of the creature's role in the world and a crucial step in its development. Initially identifying as Adam in the book, the first of his kind, he soon discovers he is more like Satan, the fallen angel, hideous and scorned, thus driving him to anger and vengeance. He swears revenge on his creator for bringing him into a world where he is universally despised. The once innocent and benevolent creature is now going scorched earth. The creature begins his rampage with the murder of Victor's younger brother, William. The creature then blackmails Victor and demands that he create for him a female companion to alleviate his crippling loneliness, threatening to continue his rampage if Victor refuses. Victor agrees, but eventually destroys the female creature before completion, fearing the creation of a new, monstrous race. In response, the creature vows to be there on Victor's wedding night. He keeps his promise and murders Victor's new bride, Elizabeth. The remainder of the novel is Victor's relentless pursuit of his creation. Driven by vengeance, Victor hunts the creature across Europe until the chase leads them both to the frozen Arctic, where the dying Victor is eventually found by Walton. The story concludes with the creature mourning the death of his creator and the bane of his existence, vowing to destroy himself, vanishing into the darkness. The story of Frankenstein was seminal and simultaneously defining and revolutionizing multiple literary categories. I already mentioned how it gave birth to science fiction, but it also signified an evolution in Gothic literature, replacing traditional Gothic elements like castles and ghosts with laboratories and modern science as sources of horror and terror, paving the way for subsequent works of science horror, perhaps even going so far as influencing the modern genre of body horror we see a lot now. It also serves as a progenitor of the horror fiction genre. What's interesting too is that on the same gloomy night Frankenstein was conceived, another foundational work in the genre, The Vampire or Vampire, was created. It was John Polidori's entry into their Ghost Story Challenge. A pretty interesting and overlooked fact. And while the book was a huge success, it was the story's adaptations in various other media like theater and film that skyrocketed its popularity and cemented its lasting legacy. I think it's important here we discuss the key differences between the novel and the original 1931 motion picture, as most of the stereotypes of the monster and Frankenstein himself stem from the film's adaptation, and there are a couple key differences between the two. These key differences simplified the narrative, altered the creature's nature, and transformed the film from a philosophical tragedy into a sensational and accessible Gothic horror tale. This was mostly due to the commercial pressures, censorship restrictions, and the practical demands of early Hollywood filmmaking. Early Hollywood operated under strict censorship codes, and this was before the Hays Code and the current MPAA codes. Basically, these were guidelines that regulated the moral content of films, including profanity, obscenity, and bigotry. Well, one of the key themes throughout the novel was the notion of playing God. Victor attempts to usurp God and create life through unhallowed methods. Well, this was toned down and the focus shifted from a philosophical sin to a scientific accident, attributing the creature's malevolence to a quote-unquote criminal or evil brain, a concept really that was absent from the novel. To make it even more morally acceptable, the concept of the creature being initially innocent until abandoned and scorned, thus transforming him, was changed. The creature had to be unambiguously monstrous and eventually destroyed, and his creator Victor, whose name was, by the way, changed to Henry for some reason in the movie, made to be the hero. And, unlike in the novel, survived and reunited with his fiancée, who was never killed by the creature, and they both lived happily ever after. So some pretty significant changes to the movie. The film also significantly simplified the novel's complex structure and themes to appeal to a wider general audience. The movie centered on a more linear narrative around Henry Frankenstein and his experiment rather than the novel's multi-layered narrative as it is often told in a third-person perspective, that of Robert Walton. Something else that was simplified for the movie was the creature himself. No longer was it an articulate being capable of learning and quoting Milton. The film creature was made mute, almost childlike and clumsy, to make him a clearer source of terror rather than a sympathetic, tragic philosopher. This created a simpler, more immediate horror villain. This left no doubt to the audiences who the bad guy was. And it's what audiences wanted to see. Other changes in the film version included the physical appearance of the creature. It was the movie that created the iconic vision of the green lumbering brute with scars and electrodes that we all know. And one other interesting difference was the introduction of the hunchback assistant Fritz in the movie. Now, a lot of you are probably saying, I thought his name was Igor. Well, you're not completely right or wrong. There is an Igor, but he doesn't appear until the movie's sequel. And he is not an assistant, but a separate character. I guess as time passed and different variations of the movie came out, it eventually led to a bit of confusion. There were other movie adaptations, quite a few actually, and some really tried to maintain the integrity of the novel and its themes. One in particular was Kenneth Branagh's 1994 adaptation. Considered to be the closest to the novel in philosophical themes, character complexity, and narrative structure, it is cited as the most faithful adaptation for several reasons. One, it explicitly retains the novel's central themes of hubris, the danger of unlimited scientific ambition, and the tragic results of creator negligence. Branagh's Victor, yeah, they didn't change his name, is driven by the arrogance of playing God, just as in the book. Two, the creature, played by Robert De Niro, is highly articulate and intelligent, a stark departure from the mute grunting versions. He learns, reads, and delivers the novel's philosophical arguments about his abandonment and his need for a companion, concepts he learns from reading Milton's Paradise Lost. And three, in this version, Elizabeth, Victor's fiancée, is killed by the creature, beginning his quest for vengeance, culminating in the meeting in the Arctic, and Victor's death and the creature mourning the loss of his creator, very much like the book. I'm actually planning to re-watch this version soon. I watched it quite some time ago, more for entertainment, but want to approach it this time around with more interest in the parallels to the book, and how closely the themes and concepts from the novel were followed. And I think Branagh's main goal was to remain true to the main theme of the novel, and that's the idea of hubris and ambition. Many don't realize this, but Frankenstein was subtitled The Modern Prometheus. Now, this signals an immediate philosophical connection. Prometheus was a titan in Greek mythology. He stole fire from the gods to give to humanity, and this fire represented the power of creation and knowledge. His punishment was eternal damnation and suffering by being bound to a rock as an eagle would pluck out and eat his liver, which would grow back, and the eagle would pluck it out and eat it again. This would happen over and over again, rinse and repeat, really bringing home the eternal suffering part. So in essence, Shelley viewed Frankenstein, the creator, not the monster, as a modern Prometheus, defying God, playing God, creating life from death. This earns Victor a life full of suffering as if he was being punished. This effectively frames the novel as a cautionary tale of human hubris and the dangerous acquisition of knowledge. Now, this isn't anything new. It's a tale as old as time, going back all the way to the Bible and the story of Adam and Eve, the tree of knowledge, God's warning, the serpent and the apple. You know the deal. Speaking of Adam and Eve, another connection Shelley makes is how, after reading Milton's Paradise Lost, the creature begins to associate and identify himself as Adam. He's the first of his kind, brought to life by a solitary creator, and how he begins to question where his Eve is, and wanting Victor to create a companion for him. But ultimately, he realizes his fate is more tied to Satan, rejected and abandoned by everyone around him. And like Satan, the creature becomes aware of how cruel and evil he is capable of becoming. This is some really deep stuff, and I could go on for a long time, but I really want to focus on Victor, because the story of Frankenstein is his. It's about him. The most common archetype associated with Victor Frankenstein is that of the solitary genius, a brilliant individual who achieves greatness and makes world-changing discoveries through isolation and obsession. A perfect example of this is Isaac Newton. He was notoriously solitary and at times paranoid, keeping his life's work secret for years. But Shelley goes further and argues against the hazards of this archetype, positing that while many good things can come of it, it is this exact isolation that can free one's ambition from the tempering influence of community and society and his own conscience, leading one to make reckless, selfish decisions. There isn't anyone there to tell him to stop and that what he's doing is wrong. This often leads one into another literary archetype, that of the mad scientist. Probably the most enduring moral from the story, this idea of unchecked ambition, can be easily applied to today's modern world. In fact, it has been applied throughout history as mankind has made major technological advancements. From the development of the atomic bomb to genetic cloning, I remember when they first cloned that sheep, Dolly, and everyone was throwing a fit, warning of the consequences of playing God. But you don't hear about that anymore. I guess they put in regulations or something. But now I hear that they're trying to bring back the dodo bird. Really? Have we not seen Jurassic Park? But anyway, all the talk now is the rise of AI. For a while back in the 80s, it was just science fiction, Skynet taking over the world. But now it's real. It's coming for jobs, your job, my job. It's providing an endless supply of misinformation on every medium possible. I've used it, I've played with it. It can be supremely beneficial, but at the same time, absolutely terrifying. It's all these tech bros now that are solely under the microscope. They're the Victor Frankensteins of today, so consumed by their desire for AI to be just like or even better than humans and for the world to accept the inevitability of it, not at all thinking about the drastic effects it can and will have on people, normal people. Because unlike us normal people, they're in no position to have their lives negatively impacted by their creation. Billionaires in their ivory towers, oblivious to the chaos below that they helped create. But I really don't want this episode to turn into an op-ed. And so here's the thing. Victor's biggest failure wasn't in ignoring the ethics and morality of his decisions, but his abandonment of responsibility, once those decisions were made. Upon seeing the monstrosity that he created, he flees in disgust and horror, leaving his creation utterly alone, confused, just born into this world. Much like a mother, a parent birthing a child, it's their responsibility, their duty to love and nurture this being they created. Without it, the child, and in Victor's case, the creature, is at the mercy of an often cruel world. Apply this now to today's technologically advanced world, specifically the relentless march and proliferation of artificial intelligence and the apparent disregard by many, especially those advocating for it, this disregard for its negative impact. But, of course, we all know what the most influential factor is for them. Knowledge without corresponding morality is very often disastrous. It's this lack of morality combined with Victor's irresponsibility that one realizes in the end that he, Victor, was the monster all along. But as far as the movie goes, the 1931 version at least, and the many others like it, it's been neutered so much that it really is bereft of any substantial meaning, serving simply as a piece of entertainment. It did, however, create many lasting stereotypes and the story's modern iconography. The story of Victor Frankenstein is a profound warning that the pursuit of power and knowledge must always be tempered by compassion and the acceptance of its consequences. You know, there's a popular acronym being thrown around now, FAFO. If you don't know what it means, look it up. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you have any thoughts about it, please post them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. I'm always looking for advice on ways to improve this podcast, and there's no better source for that than from the listeners. Join me next time when I talk about, well, I'm not sure yet what I'll talk about, what the next episode will be about. It might be about science or even sports, so subscribe to the podcast to find out. I'm also working on the social media side of things, mostly Instagram. I don't use any other platforms. There's also a website in the works, but I'll keep you updated on that. Anyways, have a safe and happy Halloween, and I will see you in the next episode. See you then.